Since we've had 4 brand new factions come out this year, I thought I'd redo my LEGO Castle faction tier list. I've changed my mind quite a lot on all of the factions since my last ranking, so this should be fun. We're going to be going from oldest to newest, starting first with the Pink Crown Knights. These guys, of course, came out in the original Yellow Castle, and they also got a modern CMF figure a couple of years back. I think the CMF fig is decent, but it's definitely lacking when you compare them to some of the other CMF remakes that we've gotten. I think Basil and the Raven Knight really just outclass this fig in all departments. It's not a bad faction, but I really don't care for these guys. Maybe if we get a remake of the Yellow Castle, they'd get bumped up a bit, but for now, they're going to remain in D tier. Next up, we have the most popular castle faction of all time. The Black Falcons are perfect, and they have fans both young and old, from their classic era roots to the modern versions that brought life back to the theme a couple years ago. If you're a fan of LEGO Castle, then you probably have an army of these guys. They are the easiest faction to collect right now, and they've had some killer sets over their 40-year run. It would be sacrilegious for me to place them anywhere but S tier. Next up, we've got the Crusaders / Lion Knights. The yin to the Falcons' yang, the Crusaders are another very memorable classic era faction, but they're one that I personally don't really like. The color scheme is very LEGO, but they're just not my cup of tea when it comes to Knights. The real saving grace with these guys is their sets. They are the centerpiece of both of the modern castle sets in the 90th anniversary castle, and of course the more recent medieval town square. It's not controversial to say that these two sets are the best medieval LEGO sets ever made, so for that, I'm going to be putting these guys in B tier. Even though I'm not a fan of them, objectively, they belong there. Continuing with our classic era giants, we have the Forestmen. The Forestmen are another one of those factions that don't really gel with me personally. I love their backstory and all, but the figures really just don't blend in with the modern factions that I prefer. That being said, these guys have had some great sets. The Forestmen's Hideout from 2022 is a fantastic little display piece, and even some of their older sets still hold up really nicely today. The Forestmen's Crossing set is a super fun playset, and I totally understand why so many people have fond memories of this faction. They just aren't for me. So I'm going to be placing these guys in the top of the C tier. Next up, we've got a couple of my favorite classic era factions. First up are the Black Knights. These guys are the only classic era faction without a modern remake. But even with that being said, I think these guys are the best of them all. They had a killer run of sets back in the early 90s with the Sea Serpent, Black Knight's Castle, and the Black Monarch's Castle. These 3 sets were a pretty big departure from the standard gray castles that fans had grown so used to in the 80s. And then the Black Knights came along with scaled armor prints and flamboyant dragon-shaped plumes shooting out of their helmets. They looked really cool, easily making them stand out against the more conservative-looking Black Falcons and Lion Knights. Obviously, their minifigures don't really stand the test of time today, but their sets and builds were the absolute best of classic era, and I really believe that LEGO Castle peaked with the Black Knight's Castle in particular. This set is just perfect in my eyes. It's what I would consider to be the best overall castle playset of all time. It had a bunch of knights, horses, and a super unique looking fortress. Not only that, but at the exact same time, you could buy the Sea Serpent to go along with your castle. This is the only classic era set that I personally own, and I think it's a really great starting point if you're wanting to start collecting classic castle, as it's not that expensive compared to some of the big castle sets. This was LEGO Castle's most ambitious boat that they ever made, and we actually just got news a couple of days ago that they are going to be finally remaking this with LEGO Ideas. Unfortunately, it's going to be a gift with purchase, but I'll take what I can get. So hopefully the Black Knights will enjoy a modern minifigure update and a beautiful new Sea Serpent boat coming sometime soon, probably in 2026. These guys are going straight into the S tier for me, without a doubt. And next we have another fan favorite from the classic era. The Wolfpack have gotten a ton of love over the past year or so, with 2 different minifigures and even some custom prints by Cult Bricks. The Wolfpack really stand out against all of the other classic factions by being a band of thieves and scoundrels. Similar to the Forestmen, but a bit greedier in their disposition. It's no surprise that people fell in love with this faction in the 90s, and then again here in the 20s. These guys look sick. Unfortunately, the Wolfpack only ever got 3 sets, and while I love the Wolfpack Tower, it really needs a modern upgrade. Just imagine how good this set could look with modern pieces and techniques. It would look so good. I love the Wolfpack a ton, and I'm going to be fitting these guys right into the A tier. Now sadly, this means we are now entering the stinky half of the classic castle era. Starting first with the Dragon Masters. To be honest with you, I used to be a pretty big fan of this faction, but as I get more and more into the castle theme, I have just soured on them big time. They have some pretty unique looking minifigures, but man, their sets are just not very good. The fire-breathing fortress, while being a super cool concept for a build, just looks kinda nasty. LEGO in this era was marred by big ugly pieces, and it's going to be very apparent from here until like Fantasy Era, which came a decade later. And even the modern Magisto's Workshop set really doesn't save this faction. That remake is easily the worst castle set since the theme came back in 2021. The figures sucked, and the build wasn't much better than the original that came out in the 90s. It's really a shame what they did with that set. The only redeeming qualities of this faction to me are Magisto, of course, some printed elements that looked really nice, and the old molded dragon. Magisto and that dragon are super iconic to LEGO Castle, so I gotta give them props for that. So I'm gonna plop these guys down into the D tier. Even worse, next up we have the Royal Knights. I've made it very clear over the years that I despise this faction. They have one of the most disgusting looking sigils of any faction, and their builds are just messy looking. Like I said a minute ago, they are riddled with giant pieces, and they just did not stand the test of time at all. Their flagship castle lacks any artistic vision and honestly is pretty hard to look at. And this is without even mentioning their minifigures. These guys just straight up look like cosplayers, and not good cosplayers, like really lazy cosplayers that threw on a costume over jeans. I hate this faction so much, they're getting banished straight into the F tier. Next up are the Dark Forestmen, and I'm not going to blame you if you have no idea who these guys are, because nobody really does. The Dark Forestmen were like kind of a soft rebrand for the faction, and had some slightly different minifigures, but they did get some pretty neat sets. Honestly, I think the Dark Forestmen probably had the best of all the Forestmen sets overall, so for that, I'll put them next to the regular Forestmen in C tier. Now finally, we have the last faction of the classic era, which is of course the Fright Knights. I believe that the Fright Knights really got screwed by their timing. If these guys were a part of like any other era of Castle, I think they could have been great. But unfortunately, they were made in the late 90s and suffered from all of the big ugly pieces of that time. Ignoring all the bad though, we did get some cool stuff out of the theme, like Basil and Willow the Witch. They are both super memorable characters that have gotten some remakes in the past year or so. To me, the CMF Basil is one of the greatest figures of all time, like no exaggeration. It is super true to the original fig, while still standing out on its own, and has brought a whole new generation of fans to the Fright Night theme. But when you look away from the figures, sadly, the Fright Night sets are pretty awful. The ideas behind a lot of the builds are really cool, but again, they just suffer from the big ugly pieces of the 90s. I've said it before in other videos, but if the Fright Knights were instead a part of Fantasy Era, I think they would have been so much more popular, and more importantly than that, they would have had a lot better builds. As much as I'd love to put them into A or even S tier, I think they truly belong in B tier, at least for now. Now that we're out of the classic era, we kind of have a string of awkward factions coming up, starting with yet another Lion faction. Again, really ugly sigil, and it's basically a rerun of the Royal Knights one. I really don't like these guys at all. I will say that they have some really decent looking minifigures for the time, but their sets and builds just look really bad. I have nothing to say about these guys, so they're going straight to the F tier with their older sibling. And to oppose those lions, we had the Bull Knights. These guys, in my view, suffered from their timing similar to the Fright Knights. I love the idea of a bull faction, but they just didn't quite work out right. They did have a pretty cool siege weapon pack, but the builds looked really rough to say it kindly. I wish these guys had better sets and figures, because as it stands, they are just not a memorable faction at all. I would love to see LEGO take another crack at them with a remake, but that seems really unlikely since they just lost a vote in a recent LEGO Ideas set. So I'm gonna be putting these guys regrettably in the D tier. Next up, we have the Scorpion Knights. They are yet another tale of a cool faction stuck in a stinky sub-theme. Knights Kingdom 2 was a mix of Bionicle and LEGO Castle. However, it didn't do either theme justice, and it left a legacy of a lot of mediocre sets that pleased neither Bionicle fans or Castle fans. Vladik, the main character, and his Scorpion Knights were in my opinion the best thing to come out of the theme. They had a couple of neat brick-built sets and a fun, dark vibe to the figures. A mean-looking scorpion made for a great antagonist faction, but sadly they had no equals in their own era. I would die for a CMF remake of Vladik, and I honestly think it's one of the more likely candidates for a future series. I like these guys a lot, but I'm gonna have to put them in C tier. Another interesting faction from Knights Kingdom 2 were the Rogue Knights. These guys had a unique for their time color scheme of bright light orange and black, a color combo that would later create one of the most popular CMF factions ever. Though LEGO made the puzzling choice to only use bright light orange on the shields, and instead they had them wear regular yellow armor. This strange choice led to them looking a bit naked, and the faction never recovered. Though I will say, I am a pretty big fan of a couple of their builds. I think they are super underrated. They will be going into D tier though, because, I mean, look at them. And to round off the awkward era of Castle, we have the Vikings. They are somewhat of an unofficial Castle faction, but I know I'd get a bunch of comments complaining if I didn't include them. The original Vikings run of sets had some pretty fun ideas, and I'm nostalgic for a few of the older sets, but I just don't think they fit the vibe of regular Castle. The two modern Viking sets that we've gotten are super nice and I love how they look, but again, I view those outside of the normal Castle theme, so I'm gonna put them in C tier. Finally, we've made it to Fantasy Era, and we're gonna start by ranking the Crown Knights. Full disclosure, I grew up with Fantasy Era, so I'm pretty biased towards some of these factions. However, I am going to try my best to rank them as objectively as I can. The Crown Knights had some pretty beautiful prints on their minifigures, and they mark a big departure from the basic knights that we had grown used to in the 80s and 90s. Metallic armor and darker blue colors gave these guys a more gritty vibe compared to the brightly colored knights of the classic era. It's a matter of personal taste which you prefer, but I find myself quite liking how these guys look. And I think they set a strong standard for all knight factions going forward. They've got a very regal appearance compared to the older factions, though I think these guys lose some points in the build department. Their flagship castle plays it super safe, and it looks fairly unremarkable even when compared to castles that came out 10 or even 20 years before it. With that being said, I do think they deserve to go into B tier. Not my favorite faction ever, but a very solid one that I think most castle fans would love to army build. Next up, we have the Skeletons. They had a couple of fun playsets like the Skeleton Ship, but honestly, they're pretty forgettable compared to the Crown Knights and upcoming Trolls. So I'm gonna put these guys in like C tier. Next up are the Dwarves. In all honesty, I don't really know why LEGO included them in Fantasy Era. They had a great flagship set with the Dwarves Mine, but the figures are just all reused parts from the Crown Knights. They did get some unique helmets, but that's all they've got to make them stand out, and I think they look pretty forgettable. The Dwarves feel like an afterthought, and for me, they're gonna be going in the C tier with the Skeletons. Finally, our last faction of Fantasy Era are the Trolls. These guys exemplify everything I love about Fantasy Era. They had some crazy ideas behind almost all of their builds. The Troll Battle Wheel is such a fun playset, and I remember wishing I had this set as a kid. And the same is true for the Troll Warship. To this day, this is my all-time most wanted set. It had some great play features on it, and it still displays really well on a shelf with those gorgeous jagged sail pieces. Then of course their figures look lovely with the puke green colored skin and the mean looking armor. That's without even mentioning the modern CMF that we got back in 2023, I think. Their figures are so good, I love them. My bias is definitely influencing me here, but these guys are going straight into the S tier. I really hope LEGO revisits the Orc faction at some point, because a modern set of these guys would be so cool to get. Now we're moving into the Kingdoms era. This sub-theme toned down a lot of the fantasy elements from the previous theme, and instead brought Castle back to its roots with a good lion faction and an evil dragon faction. The Red Lions have some of the cleanest looking minifigures that we've ever gotten, and they feel like a true knight in shining armor faction. The printed breastplates and regal looking king are almost too on the nose, but I have to say I love them. Though over the years I will say that I think LEGO played it a little too safe with their flagship castle design. It looks fine, but again, it doesn't do anything that interesting, and personally they still failed to beat the Black Knight's castle from the early 90s. The castle just isn't that inspiring and is kinda plain. Though as a faction overall, I still love these guys and they're gonna go into A tier. To oppose the Red Lions, we had the Green Dragons. This one is a fan favorite faction for a number of reasons. Starting with the figs, these fellas had a sharp look with the dark green and dark metallic color scheme. It's one of my personal favorite factions to army build, and I know a lot of other people love these figs as well because they are ridiculously expensive nowadays. Though it's not just the figures, they had some really sick builds too. Their forts were done in black and brown colors and really stood out against the red lions that they fought. In my view, they were the perfect two opposing factions, and I doubt LEGO will ever top these two in another sub-theme. Sadly, the Green Dragons never got a flagship castle because the theme was cut short by Castle 2013. I still hold out a little bit of hope that LEGO will revisit these guys at some point, but I'm likely coping here, let's be honest. The Green Dragons are going to meet the Black Knights, Falcons, and Orcs in the S tier. I love these guys. Moving on, we're now into the final sub-theme that Castle ever had back in 2013, which is kind of crazy to say. Starting with the Blue Lions. Now, when I made my previous tier list, I was rather harsh on these guys, but in the time between, I have really grown to appreciate this faction. I'm still not a fan of this sigil, but it's hard to deny how good these minifigures look. The prints hold up really well today, and can be combined into other blue factions super easily. I personally have used a lot of their torsos for my Dragonborn faction, but they are just as easily morphed into whatever you want them to be. Which doesn't make them a very strong faction if you think about it, but they're just really good figures. Now with all that out of the way, their sets are so boring. LEGO went way too safe with these builds, and they created a lineup of sets that kind of felt like a parody of LEGO Castle. The sub-theme frankly feels very cynically made, and I am not a fan at all. I think these sets suck. But they're not quite F tier worthy, so I think I'll put these guys somewhere in D tier. And I feel pretty much the same way about the Red Dragons that they were up against. Again, these guys had some absolutely fantastic looking minifigures and accessories, but their sets were just not special at all. So I'll put them next to each other in the D tier. Now we have a couple of CMF factions before getting to the 4 new ones that are coming out in 2025. The Bear Knight here is a gorgeous looking figure, but I don't personally think I would ever army build them because they're like $50 a piece. So I'm gonna put them in C tier. Now look, the Raven Knights are obviously my personal all-time favorite faction, but if I had to give them a more objective look, they are really hard to army build due to their rarity and crazy aftermarket price, so unless you already have an army of them, these guys are not worth trying to build. And while I love their color scheme a ton, I know there are quite a few people who actually hate it, which is surprising to me, but whatever. For me, they're gonna have to go into the top of the S tier. I love these guys, but it's all personal preference at the end of the day. And finally, oh my god, we have reached the 4 brand new factions. The Horse Knights are up first, and I have what I think might be a little bit of a hot take about these guys. As it stands, I think the new Horse Knights are a very exciting faction, but they feel a little uninspired due to the fact that we just got the D&D figure that has this exact same aesthetic. I think if the Dragonborn Paladin wasn't so fresh on our minds, I think we'd be a lot more intrigued by this faction, but as it stands, I love the 2 new horse figures that we got, and I imagine this faction will become a fan favorite in time when it comes out in the summer. And I'm really hoping that we get some more sets down the line with them because I think they have great potential, but for now, I'm gonna put them at the bottom of the B tier. Unfortunately, I think their castle build is just really holding them back from anything higher right now. This set is a little plain looking. Opposite the Horse Knights are the new Rogue Snakes. I think LEGO really knocked this figure out of the park. The purple, black, and yellow color scheme is lovely, and the scaled designs on the armor, it's just perfect. I love how this looks. Obviously, I like the snake sigil as well with the yellow. It looks really, really sick. I am excited to see if we end up getting another castle for them in the future. It is kind of teased on the box art of the horse set, but for now, I'm going to be putting these guys just above the Horse Knights in B tier, but if we get more of them, I could see these guys going to the A tier or maybe even the S tier. I really love how they look. Next are the Krakens. I think many of us were pretty disappointed by this faction as it looks kinda off. It's not a bad figure by any means, but there's just something about it that doesn't work for me. I think I might like it more in person, but for now, the Krakens are going into the C tier. And last but not least, we have the Griffin Knights. I was genuinely shocked by how good this faction looks. The rich colors and gorgeous armor prints are, in my view, the best of all 4 new factions, and the usage of the Hylian shield makes perfect sense for them. It looks so nice. If LEGO is going to make another set with any of these 4 new factions, I really hope it's for the Griffins. They are easily my favorite of the 4, and would make for a lovely good guy castle faction and a potential new sub-theme. Not that I think we're going to get that, but I can dream. So these guys are going to go into the B tier, but I could see them climbing up to S if they end up getting more sets down the road. And that's the end of this pretty exhaustive tier list. If you'd like to see it, I'll leave a link to my old video from almost 2 years ago now, as my opinions have changed quite a lot since I made that video. Please let me know where you would rank all of these factions in the comments below, and as always, thank you so much for watching.